Sign Pro on Brooks.
Problem. The ones that erode our community. The United Way of Missoula County finds every dollar to address them, no matter the obstacles, no matter the odds. They surround our community's most critical problems. They fight for the education, financial stability, and the health of every person. Because change doesn't happen alone. We have one life, and we must live united. Together, there is a way. Donate today by visiting MissoulaUnitedWay.org.
Hey, this is Jeremy with your locally owned and operated Domino's. School's back in session, and we're excited for another great school year. We know what happens when school is open. Some people go to bed early, and some not so much. So if you like staying up late, keep in mind so does Domino's. We're delivering pizzas, pastas, and sandwiches till 2 a.m. or later. And our drivers are happy to deliver food while you're up late studying for your classes. So give us a call at 721-7610 on South Ave, 926-6411 on Reserve Street, or check us out online at Domino's.com.
Next Saturday, December 7th, is Church Polaris' 7th annual Snow Day. Church Polaris will have the best deals you'll see all season on winter gear and snowmobile accessories. With the best brands including Climb, Keeps, 509, SLP, Snowpulse, and PCA, they will have prices so low, Church is actually barred from announcing them on the radio. Free coffee, free lunch, and presents for every person on your Christmas list. The biggest sale of the entire year for one day only, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. next Saturday, December 7th. Church Polaris Snow Day, 2904 West Broadway in Missoula.
Crawford's Automotive knows that winter driving is hard on vehicles and anything can go wrong. That's why Crawford's is the best place to take your vehicle when work needs to get a full-service shop, no matter what your rig needs. Simple oil change, brakes, new engine, or transmission, Crawford's Auto will get the job done in a good time and at a fair price. Chase Crawford's been working in Missoula on vehicles for decades. His name is on the shop, and his reputation is second to none. So when your rig needs some work done, go to Crawford's, 2504 West Broadway. Crawford's Automotive.
More than 33,000 students in Montana are alone and unsupervised after school. The Boys and Girls Club of Missoula County is working every day to change that statistic. With 6 after-school clubhouse locations across the county, hundreds of kids are provided with a safe, positive place to go to after school. You can help more kids experience our clubs with a donation to the Back a Kid Scholarship Fund. To get involved, visit bgcmissoula.org today.
This message is brought to you by Rob Fleming and Man Mortgage, 704 West Sussex, Missoula.
At Holiday, we're adding a new all-star to our breakfast roster. Introducing the new Triple Double 3-meat, 2-cheese sandwich. It's got 2 Jimmy Dean sausage patties, plus bacon and a home-style egg with cheddar and pepper jack cheese. And at $2.99, I'd say this makes breakfast a slam dunk. So take a time out and travel to Holiday and try our new breakfast sandwich, the Triple Double. Only $2.99, only for a limited time, and only at Holiday.
Bethel Community Church offers a free clothes closet that is open to the public each Tuesday. There are literally thousands of new and gently used items for the entire family in virtually all sizes. There's a good selection of cold weather clothing as well as casual, dress, and professional clothing, shoes, coats, and more. People are invited to take whatever they need. Call Bethel Community Church for more information at 721-2780 or visit www.bethelmissoula.com.
Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. 4 o'clock, Montana's only statewide sports talk show. 102.9 ESPN Radio for Western Montana and across the state on SWX Television.
I like football!
Now, the 2017 Radio Sports Broadcaster of the Year on the show with back-to-back Montana Broadcaster Association awards for sports coverage and award-winning sports journalism. Here is Ryan Tootell and Colter Nuanez.
Hello, Montana. Grizz 119, a blowout. Where does that leave us headed into the postseason, and where does it leave us heading in to the next years? It is Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio and SWX Montana Television. Outstanding to be with you here on this, what is it, Monday afternoon? It's a huge, huge day as we get you set for the playoffs that are forthcoming, but not until we get to everything that transpired in an absolute stunner in one sense on Saturday, although don't ask Braden Conkle. He thought it was pretty much apropos and expected. So we'll get to all of that from a 48-14 dismantling of Montana by Montana State. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, and online at kurtzpolaris.com. December 7th is Kurt's 7th annual snow day. You get in there one day only, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and they will have you, with the best deals of the entire year by far, one day only at Kurtz Polaris. You can find us on the World Wide Web, 1029ESPN.com. There you can listen live via the Listen Live tab. It is a stream. It's brought to us by Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. And if you want to pick up your phone and call, 329-1899 is your phone number, 329-1899 the phone number. All guests join us via the Rangich Brothers RV phone line. Let's take a look at what we got in the show today. We start as we do the first hour of every show, although let's be honest, we're going to be talking about this for a long time. It is the Montana Football Hour. It is presented by Lithia Ford of Missoula. We will talk Cat. We will talk Grizz. We will talk the absolute hammer that the Montana State Bobcats dropped down on the Grizzlies on Saturday, and where that leaves these two programs, not just heading into the postseason, but eventually into the offseason and in general within the scope of football in the state of Montana, because that was resounding in every way. And as we talked about last week, Coulter, Montana State had the opportunity to kind of put up the hand of Neo and just bring everything to a screeching halt. They did that and more, it seems to me, on Saturday afternoon. So we'll get through all of that stuff. We also, in the next hour, are going to look ahead into the FCS playoffs and both Montana schools receiving a seed and a bye heading into the postseason. In fact, 4 Big Sky Conference schools getting a bye in the first round of the playoffs, seeding 3 through 6. Weber, Sacramento, Montana State, and Montana in that order. So we'll take a look at that, and we will also get into a little bit of high school stuff. Coulter and I attended. We were able to get to about the second half of the Class AA state championship game, in which the second half resembled a lot of what happened on Saturday, in fact, in Bozeman, with Montana State beating down the Grizzlies. Well, Bozeman, it was 14-14 at halftime, but they were able to overrun Butte in the second half of that football game and get themselves into a state championship, the Bozeman Hawks, over the Butte Bulldogs. So good job for them. We'll tell you all about it in the second hour as well. So there you go. There's our show outline. It's brought to us by Shine Auto Detailing. Shine Auto Detailing. Get your car detailed today, not just to get it clean, but to get it protected. And you will get a free headlamp restoration as well with any detailing at Shine Auto Detailing. Coulter, we head into the Montana Football Hour presented by Lithia Ford. We're going to start with Montana State, and we're going to hear from Jeff Choate, a couple of players as well. So we got a ton of sound for you from this game and from the press conferences. But in general, Coulter, from the very first second of this football game to the last one, it was not a win, an absolute dismantling, a dominant performance by Montana State. And to me, an absolute message sender. I mean, this is a game that is more than just a game every year, but for what has been 3 seasons prior to this of wins by Montana State, and they're, continuing to grow the program, the return of Bobby Hauck last season, Montana with the huge lead and then losing on the fumble on the goal line and all of that, and people said, I think that where Montana fans, took that and said, man, that's a tough way for that to go, but that'll be the last one of those for a while, because Bobby Hauck and RTD and everything else, and then they're rolling. And what they did to Weber State a week ago, I asked you in a post game against Weber State, does this influence what you think about Montana and what could happen in the Cat Grizz game? You said absolutely it does. And in the moment, how could it not, because of how great they were? And yet we know this game is played in a vacuum every year. I mean, there is no connection per se from week to week into the Cat Grizz game. But to have Montana completely and totally turned around, looked like the softest team that you've ever seen, or to say that positively, Montana State looked like the toughest, most physical team I have seen this season by far. And what they did to run through Montana, 382 yards on the ground, an offensive line that did whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted for 60 minutes, and frankly, a defensive line that 6 sacks of Dalton Sneed, 46 yards, I think, of rushing for the Grizzlies on the entire day. I mean, it was an absolutely it wasn't close in any facet of this entire game. And for a game that was supposed to be, was between two top 10 teams and two teams that are trying to get onto a nationally elite scale, you thought it was going to be more even than that at the very least, and it certainly was not. And Montana State was better in every way and just pounded the Grizzlies for 60 minutes, and that will resound for weeks and months and maybe even years to come.
Well, absolutely. It was the pivotal victory by Montana State of the century. In the arc of the rivalry, it was the most impactful victory Montana State has had by a Bobcat team. The last time a Bobcat team had won by 34 or more points came in 1966. The last time a Montana State team had even beat a Montana team by 3 scores came in 1985, which was the year before the streak started. We took you through the history all year last week, or all week last week. To me, I judge this whole rivalry based in 4 different eras. There's the pre-Big Sky Conference era, which lasted from 1897 to 1963. All the way up until 1959, Montana State was not even an NCAA-affiliated school. So the schools were not even in the same division. They're not even in the same level of play. They're not even in the same affiliation of sponsorship. The Cats were an NAIA team. The Grizz were in the NCAA. So that, to me, you could take that history for what it's worth. Mm-hmm. I think that Montana won something like 40 out of 44 or something during that era, so they stacked the docket pretty heavily. But since 1963 to 1985, the Cats won 17 out of 23. Thorough domination by Montana State. Montana builds Washington Grizzly Stadium, hires Don Reed, 16 in a row against the Cats, and the rest is history. But I wrote that in my game story because I think that the streak, all the things that people don't like about this rivalry, the stuff that Bobby Houck talked about last week, the hatred, the vitriol, the fact that it's over the top, the fact that no matter what your season is, no matter what your career is, no matter what your resume has been at those schools, you're literally coaching for your job in this game. And Rob Ashe won 70 games and got fired at Montana State because he couldn't beat the Grizz. So that's here nor there, though. That streak, though, it established a gigantic superiority complex for people around the University of Montana, and in a lot of ways, justifiably so. The Grizz not only dominated the rivalry, but also rose to heights unseen for a Montana school at the Division I era. 7 national championship appearances in 14 years, 2 national titles, and 16 straight wins over your rival. But then when the Cats won in Missoula in 2002, it snapped the streak and started a new era. And that new era came to an end on Saturday because Montana State capped the decade with their 6th win in the last 10 tries. They won this decade. They have not won a decade against the Grizzlies in a generation. They evened the docket since that 2002 game. It's now 9-9. And so now this whole thing, even since the streak ended, which was 17 years ago, Grizz fans could still say, well, you're the little brother. You haven't won a national championship. You haven't beaten us like we've beaten you. We still own this 10 years, this 20 years, this decade. None of it's true anymore. It capped the first 20 years of the 20th century, and now we'll see where this goes. Because I do think it's very compelling what's going to happen with these two programs moving forward. But make no mistake, the last 4 years, Montana State has physically whipped the Grizzlies. And the 3 previous years before Saturday paled in comparison. The narratives of Montana's improved offensive and defensive fronts were thrown out the window. I still think that their fronts are way better than they have been. But guess what else? Guess what was the most undertold story of this entire game?
That so is Montana State.
Montana State's fronts are significantly better too, which means that they're nationally elite. I heard so often from Grizz fans that said, we heard you on the radio talking about the Cats having the best offensive and defensive lines that the Montana Grizzlies have seen. What about Sac State? What about Weber State? I think those two teams have great fronts. I think those two teams have better fronts than Montana. Nobody has better fronts than Montana State.
382 rushing yards to 49. 6 sacks to 0. I mean, I know. Stats are for losers. But, I mean, they also at some point don't. I mean, they do lie in a lot of ways. Those don't lie. When you are minus 350 in the rushing game.
Yep.
It's not even comprehensible.
We're going to get into the whys here in the second segment of this show. But if you take out the 4 Wildcat plays that Montana State ran with Travis Johnson, which netted 0 yards, they had 2 tackles for loss and 2 tackles for 1-yard gains.
The one play that Montana was prepared for.
Those are the 4 times when Jace Lewis and Dante Olson were in the Bobcat backfield. Other than that, Montana State averaged 7.7 yards per carry. Even with those plays included, they still averaged 6.5 yards per carry on 62 rushes. Isaiah Fonse, over 170 yards. Logan Jones, over 120 yards. One of the greatest moments of this whole game was after the game, when the offensive line's carrying the trophy around. And Logan Jones is on the headset getting swarmed by Bobcat fans. He's doing the Root Sports interview. And somebody says to it, I think Tom Glasgow says to Logan Jones, he says, Logan Jones joins us from the field. Logan Jones, 121 yards and a touchdown. And Logan just goes, ooh, he didn't even know. But I saw Damian Washington on the field after the game.
Yeah.
And I just overheard a conversation he was having with Braden Conkle. But he says, Braden, how many yards do you think we rushed for, bro? I think that they rushed for 500 yards. And that's what it seemed like in the scope of a game. It really did. I can't remember a Cat Grizz game like this, where one team, I talked to you about this, there's the barometer of momentum, right? There's 100% that you can have. And oftentimes a team makes a play and they get 80 or 85% of that barometer of momentum. And the other team's just holding on for dear life to just maybe get their turn. And then when they get it, sometimes it swings right back to the middle. The Cats had 100% of the momentum from the moment Jory Choate made a tackle on the opening kickoff.
14-yard line.
To the moment that Jacque Allen took Samari Torre's head off. Fumble, Derek Marks recovers. To the moment Kevin Cassis scores on a reverse, 7-0 Cats. To the moment that the Cats are up 17-0, 10 minutes in the game. It was a boat race. The thing that was the craziest part about it is, of all the scenarios we could have played out, it was the most unpredictable one. And because it played out like it did, Bobcat Stadium was louder than I've ever heard it.
Ever.
The pandemonium and the enthusiasm in Bozeman from start to finish was like no other sports experience I've ever had.
We have been at how many Cat Grizz games in Bozeman? We have been at how many playoff games in Bobcat Stadium in Bozeman? And how many other games? The Gold Rush game, under the lights, first game of the season. It wasn't close to the atmosphere that was there on Saturday. The last thing I'll say about this, Coulter, is just in general this thing, and you touched on it. Like, all of that stuff is over now. In terms of the best team of the decade, the best team of the century, whatever. You talked about the superiority complex and or inferiority complex that has surrounded these two schools, particularly around the football program, for a long, long time because of the street. We talked to Mike Kramer 2 weeks ago. He said, I still can't believe that the clock went to zeros the day we won. He's the head coach of the team. You're always supposed to say, well, we expect to win. We're going to go and win. He said, it's 30 years ago. I still can't believe, or whatever, 20 years ago. I still can't believe we won the football game. Right?
And that's because that's because in the late 90s, Montana State lost a couple games in just outrageous, unbelievable fashion.
And so here's what I'm saying is the last 3 years, and it's been Jeff Choate, and it's a whole different deal. And I'm not saying this is his mindset whatsoever, but in general, broadly, it seems like Montana State, the organization, right, the fans, the vibe, the thing around, is like thrilled and surprised that they beat Montana. Yesterday, there was, when you'll hear from the coaches and you'll hear from the players especially, the only surprise is that it wasn't more than 48-14 to them. That is the only thing that they're surprised about. And that was real. I mean, that's not just smack talking after the game. You know when a team is just completely dead set confident and knows that it's going to do what it did. And they knew it. They knew it the whole way through. And I don't know when that has ever been the case from Montana State to Montana in the modern recent history of this rivalry. And it is the case now. And I think it introduces not just a modicum, but a significant amount of doubt to the one person who on the exterior never has any doubt, and that's Bobby Hauck. I mean, Bobby Hauck has to be sitting here going, oh, it is a different universe. I am not in the same spot that I was even a decade ago, riding absolutely on the top where it's Montana and everybody else in the Big Sky Conference. There's 4-seeded teams. You're one of those teams, and Montana has a huge season still ahead of it in the playoffs, and we're going to get to all of that over the next 2 weeks because this is awesome, man. We're talking about the number 5 and 6 teams in the nation at the end of the year right now in the state of Montana. This is what we've been hoping for, wanting. But when it comes to this rivalry, there is no longer more of an expectation of winning on one side than the other. Both teams are going to expect to win equally, and both teams, I think, have to have respect for the other side from a football standpoint, which, frankly, Montana did not have from Montana State yesterday. They on Saturday, excuse me. They went in hugely, supremely confident, the Montana Grizzlies did. I have no doubt about that. But not with the respect of their opponent that you need to have. And when it actually came time to play, they were stunned at what was happening to them and had no response for it. Because there was not a level of belief that it was even possible that another team, that this team could be better than them, and they were across the board.
I mean, I don't want to be too snarky here, but when Coach Houck tells us on Monday, I've only really watched the kick teams. Maybe should have watched the Northern Colorado game. And the way that the Cats loosened up the edges with the wide receiver reverse and then ran it straight up the gut. Because that's what they did to the Grizz, too. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe you should have watched the film of the team that's rushing for 325 yards a game in the month of November the last 3 years. We're going to get into the arc of this whole thing and just the trends for both sides and all that. But I think that the last 4 years since Jeff Choate took over, when Montana State won in Missoula in 2016, it was a cataclysmic upset. Certainly. 2017, it was a reaffirmation of the fact that Bob Stitt was not the right fit but at Montana. And that was the narrative that dominated not just the Cats, because it was still a 5-6 Cat team that didn't go to the playoffs.
Right.
And then last year, Bobby Houck's back. And then the Grizz are up 22-0. And the Grizz right everything that's gone wrong the last month of the season. They'd lost 3 in a row, but then they'd won in resounding fashion over Southern Utah and Idaho, and now they have this chance. They're up 22-0 against their rival. Then they blow it. But it was still the Grizz blowing it as much as the Cats winning it. And then all of a sudden, old demons. You're talking about the number 3 team in the country that just annihilated the defending Big Sky Conference champs. The Juggernaut's back. Nobody's giving the Cats a chance. Play that Braden Conkle sound.
That's soul-taking stuff right there.
Soul-taking stuff.
Play the one about Sunday. When he was asked, when did you know you were going to win the game? Do we have that one?
Yeah. When did you know that the game was over?
Sunday last week. I mean, I knew we were going to. Saturday, actually, right after the UC Davis game. I mean, I was waiting for this all year.
We talk about how Bobby Houck refuses to let his team believe that it's even a possibility to lose. And I think that Jeff Choate talks so well and so often and so eloquently, and he sets up these scenarios and he paints the picture, and you have a full, all-encompassing view of what the game might be. But make no mistake, especially the senior captains for the Bobcats, there was no doubt in their minds they were going to beat the Grizzlies for a 4th straight time.
Let's listen to some sound because there's a ton of it, and it's really good. The run game is maybe the most obvious play, certainly when you talk about the Montana State offense, that this game was dominated, 382 yards rushing. The question for Jeff Choate is, as the game went on, when and how did he sense that the run game was wearing on the Grizzlies, which was clear to see?
Yeah, we were getting 4 yards on inside zone pretty much at will, The only time that they really gave us any problems was on short yardage and some sub package. And I think that, Dante, being a really smart, good football player, identified some tendencies and kind of jumped some gaps and hit us a couple times. But, we controlled the line of scrimmage, and that's how you win games.
Colton, you asked him about the 5th-year seniors from the state of Montana on this team, who I guess there's 6 of them.
And I misspoke. I said 7, and that's why he corrects me. Because I forgot Jared Padmus didn't redshirt. He was a true senior, but he's still a Montana guy that's playing in this game.
Point being, the seniors on this team from the state of Montana, and the question to Jeff Choate is, how much did this game mean to those guys on this team?
The thing is, these guys are the survivors. These are the guys that stayed because it meant something to them to be a Bobcat and wear the blue and gold through the coaching change. And they're tough suckers, and they represent this university in a first-class fashion. They're all going to graduate. They're all going to go on and do great things in their life, and they're all going to be able to walk the streets as proud Bobcats for the rest of their life.
this is something that I think is pretty. Here's what's interesting. Jeff Choate, like you said, I mean, he will talk as long as he wants to, and will go very off for a long time, except for after the Cat-Chris football game. He's 4-0 in it. He walks in, does not make an opening statement, says, "I got places to be. What do you got?" 7 minutes, done. I mean, he doesn't need to sit here and revel in it in front of everybody because everything's been done on the field. So there's not a ton of sound from him. There, you can go to SkylineSportsMT.com and watch the full press conference of all of it. But there is one other thing that we haven't even touched on yet, which is remarkable because if you would have known this ahead of time, this would have been and probably should have been the overarching narrative of this entire game one way or another, and in certain ways it is. But Troy Anderson did not play in this football game, did not even suit up in this game. And we'll hear from Bobby Hauck. That was significant in terms of their preparation, and that's real. Like, I mean, when you sit there and you think a guy is going to play